If you're a composer, you've probably asked the infamous question, what makes a piece of music sound good? And I know you probably think that good is a somewhat subjective statement, and you're correct in thinking that. However, when it comes to music, there are certain fundamental principles, universal laws, and standards that dictate if something's going to sound relatively unpleasant or slightly more tolerable. Oh, I almost forgot. I should probably introduce myself. Hi, my name is Gabe, the audio architect. Welcome to my channel devoted to demystifying the creative process by exploring the topic of video game music and audio. Let's get into it. So, back to this business of answering the infamous question. How do we, as a composer, make something sound good? There are a lot of angles to answer this from, and it would be impossible to cover this in a single video. But I'll share with you a concept that will hopefully prompt you to think about this question in a new way. When you think about music, think about this word, relationship. More specifically, the relationship between these three musical elements. Behold, the three sacred pillars of music! Sorry. Understanding the relationship between melody, rhythm, and harmony and how they affect one another allows our compositions to go from being unpleasant to more tolerable. But what exactly is the relationship between melody, rhythm, and harmony? And how do they cooperate to better our compositions? It's a good question, and I'm glad you asked. To illustrate my point, we're going to be analyzing some game music, which I feel is an excellent example of these three musical elements working together to produce a simple yet exceptionally well-composed piece of music. So today, we're going to be analyzing green greens. And before we go any further, I ask that you please consider hitting those like, subscribe, and bell notification icons to help my channel grow and to be notified when I release a new weekly video. This tune is a staple piece of music for pretty much every Kirby game. But wait, before we analyze this piece, I need to cover some basic music theory so that we can have a foundation of understanding to build upon. We need to start by examining the construction of diatonic major scales, as we will be working with these types of scales when analyzing green greens. Every major scale consists of 7 notes. Though it is helpful to know scales in terms of their note names, it's a better use of our time to explain things in terms of scale degrees, as the same formula can be applied regardless of what key we are in. Scale degrees are numbers given to each step of the scale relative to the starting note, often referred to as the tonic. Though the note names and the pitches change from key to key, a diatonic major scale will always have scale degrees 1 through 7, with the 3rd, 6th, and 7th scale degree being major in relation to our tonic. Now, every scale has corresponding chords constructed from the notes within that scale. Similarly to there being 7 scale degrees in a major scale, there are 7 chords available in each key that are represented with Roman numerals 1 through 7. The first chord in a major scale is 1 major, the second is 2 minor, the third is 3 minor, the fourth is 4 major, the fifth is 5 major, the sixth is 6 minor, and the seventh is 7 diminished. Each of these chords is constructed by 3 notes, the root, which is the starting note, the third, and the fifth. An easy way to discover the notes that make up any given chord is to first count 3 notes starting from the root note and then 5 notes from the root. If the interval created between the root and the third is a major third, then the chord itself will be major. If the interval created between the root and the third is a minor third, then the chord itself is minor. The fifth doesn't give us any indication of the chord quality until we reach 7 diminished. These types of chords that are composed of 3 notes are referred to as triads. If you add a 4th note, creating a major or a minor 7th between the root and the additional note, the chord becomes a 7th chord. When we analyze the following piece of music, you will see examples of triads and 7th chords. Now I know that this can all seem somewhat convoluted to some individuals who are newer to music terminology. I'm making this video assuming that you have some foundational understanding of music theory. So to help solve any confusion, I've included a transcript of this video on my website. Also, if you sign up for my newsletter, you will receive weekly content that helps to break down these concepts further and explain them in the simplest way possible. You can find the links in the description below. Now, it's finally time to take a look at green greens. This piece starts in the key of C major for its A section and modulates up a minor third to the key of E flat major for its B section. You will notice that I have written the melody an octave lower than what you hear so that it's easier to read. The first thing that we should bring our attention to is the rhythmic figure, which we find frequently repeated throughout the melody. The repetition of a dotted eighth note to 16th note, preceded by either a dotted half or a quarter note, is one of the main factors that gives this melody its distinct sense of motion. We see this frequently appear in the A section and then again in the B section. In fact, this theme is immediately established in our minds in the first three notes, demonstrating the benefit of simple motivic writing. As we go through the verse, we start with a C chord that lasts 2 measures. In measures 2 to 3, we encounter our very first melodic point of interest. We see a C major triad with the melody ending on C, an octave higher than where we started. The use of this C major triad highlights the C major chord and gives the melody the ability to creatively descend down the scale before finally giving us the satisfaction of resolving. In part, the sense of resolution is caused by the melody coming up the octave and descending again, and in part, caused by the repetition of the rhythmic motif in these 3 chords, D minor 7 to G, then resolving to C. This progression is commonly referred to as a 2-5 turnaround, or a 2-5-1. As I explained before, these are the Roman numerical values assigned to each chord based on their position within the chord scale. This is a common but beneficial technique used when wanting to instigate a smooth harmonic transition back to our 1 chord. Harmonically, G, which is the 5 chord in the key of C, is the dominant chord within the key. It's probably the second most important chord next to the tonic because it creates a sense of instability for the listener, requiring it to resolve to the 1 chord. We see this dominant tonic resolution implied in the melody in measures 1 to 2 and 5 to 6. This chord progression, followed by the 4 chord, is the entire B section's harmonic foundation. D minor 7, the 2 minor chord in the key of C major, further prepares the listener for the 5 chord to finally arrive at our desired destination. It's so effective in preparing the listener for the inevitable resolution back to our tonic because of the intervallic relationship between the notes as we transition from each chord. If the chord was voiced in a way that allowed for the smallest movement between notes, you could really hear how each note moves and resolves from 1 chord to the next. Continuing our exploration of tension and resolution, measure 8 gives us an alternative use of a 5-1 resolution. Here we see the first chord starting to mirror the typical 2-5-1 we saw in measure 4. However, we then see something slightly unexpected, an E dominant 7 chord to A minor. A minor is our desired destination and is the 6 minor chord in the key of C major. In a lot of contemporary music, it's common to see a 2-5 turnaround deceptively resolve to 6 minor instead of 1. It's a creative way of surprising the listener and works harmonically because the 6 minor chord shares all but 1 note with 1 major. However, in this example, we see E dominant 7 used in this context to substitute the 5 chord. This is known as a secondary dominant. A secondary dominant is the 5-7 of the chord you desire to resolve to. In this case, E7 is the 5-7 of A minor. It's understood as 5-7 of 6 because technically we are not switching keys. However, if you were to isolate these 3 chords without hearing the rest of the music in context, you would automatically assume that A minor is the new tonic because of the way E7 resolves to A minor. This use of a secondary dominant is highly effective as it pulls our attention and expectation towards A minor before returning us to C. A secondary dominant is also used in the last measure of the B section when we arrive at the G chord. This G chord within the key of E flat can be considered 5 of 6 if it were to resolve to C minor and pays homage to the secondary dominant we hear in the A section. However, this G chord is being used to prepare our ears to return to the A section in the key of C major. Therefore, this measure, because it helps to return us to the A section, can also be considered a 5-1 resolution, for this is what is harmonically implied. Although simple and repetitive, this piece is a wonderful example of good writing. It gives us extraordinary insight into how we can more effectively utilize the relationship between rhythm, melody, and harmony to better our compositions. By now, I think we can agree that good writing comes from these three musical elements, rhythm, melody, and harmony, working together to achieve a common purpose. Every component of this piece has been given careful thought to solidify the musical idea that wants to be conveyed. In this case, Kirby's whimsical, fun, and playful nature. This notion also shows us the importance of understanding music theory. Familiarizing ourselves with these concepts eliminates guesswork and gives us a structure through which we can channel our creativity. The relationship of two or more components working with one another to achieve a vision is also reflected in many other contexts, which we must work within as game composers. For example, we must consider the relationship between our compositions, instrumentation, arrangement, and mix. And before we begin composing, we must consider the relationship between the music or audio, how it informs us of the player's actions as they interact with the environment, and how the music contributes to the environment's aesthetic. Now that we know why Green Greens is just so good, the challenge is to use this piece as a reference to create something of our own. And if you want to challenge yourself and grow as a composer, I encourage you to do the same. Take the concepts explained in this video, use this track as a reference, and see what you can create. Stay tuned for next week's video, where we take what we've learned and turn it into an original composition. In the meantime, leave a comment below, telling us what you like about this piece and what you've learned. Thanks for watching, have an amazing day, and stay blessed.